In the quiet town of Ajadai, nestled between rising hills and market dust, lived a 35-year-old woman named Adira. She was a painter, no, a storyteller with a brush. Her canvases breathed. Her colors spoke. But to her family, she was simply Adira the burden. Her mother, Mama Titi, often told visitors, "Adira's just wasting time smearing colors. She should have been married by now, or at least gotten a real job." Her father, Baba Okonkwo, never said much, but his silence weighed heavier than his words ever could. Adira worked in a makeshift studio built from scrap wood behind their home. She painted until her hands cramped and her eyes blurred. Her dream? To someday be seen, not only as an artist, but as a woman of worth. One morning, a message arrived. A curator from Lagos had discovered her work online and forwarded it to a major investor, Eli Matata, a renowned global collector known for turning local artists into legends. Adira nearly dropped the phone. Eli Matata? The man who launched 3 of Nigeria's top artists? He wanted to meet. She shared the news that night over dinner, but her family scoffed. Eli who? Mama Titi rolled her eyes. Nah, painting go feed you? Go wash plate if you want to make money. Adira laughed nervously. Mama, this is real. He saw my portfolio and… Baba Okonkwo slammed his cup down. Leave our house if you want to keep chasing ghosts. Adira blinked, stunned. What? Tomorrow, he said. Pack your brushes and go. Rain tapped gently on the tin roof as Adira packed her things that night. Her heart wasn't broken, it was burning. Burning with hurt, yes, but also with clarity. As she stepped into the storm, canvas bag slung over her shoulder, she whispered to herself, "They don't see me, but I see me." She stayed with her childhood friend, Nanai, a spoken-word poet who lived in a one-room flat in Lagos. Nanai hugged her tightly. "Let them watch from a distance when you rise." Adira didn't respond. She just set up her canvas in the corner of the room and began painting, through the tears, through the ache. 3 days later, she sat across from Eli Matata in a glass-walled gallery near Victoria Island. He didn't ask her to explain her work. He didn't demand credentials. He simply walked around her paintings, quietly observing. Then he said, "Your colors carry thunder. Where have you been hiding?" Adira smiled shyly. In plain sight. He signed a contract right there. $1 million. 2 exhibitions in Europe. Her own Lagos studio space. Adira cried for the first time in weeks, but not from sadness. From release. Within months, Adira's name was on the lips of every art lover in West Africa. The girl from Ajadai paints like her spirit met fire. Her brush tells stories no words could. She moved into a minimalist loft in Lagos, opened her first solo exhibition, and began mentoring 3 young female artists who reminded her of herself. Meanwhile, back in Ajadai, Mama Titi heard whispers in the market. Adira's worth millions now. She's flying to France next week. Suddenly, Adira was no longer a burden. She was a beacon. The knock on Adira's studio door startled her. It was late. When she opened it, her heart stopped. Mama Titi and Baba Okonkwo stood there, dusty, stiff, and clearly uncomfortable. "Adira, we were just in town," Mama began, fidgeting with her wrapper. "We thought maybe we could see your place." Adira blinked. She hadn't heard from them in 6 months. Baba Okonkwo shifted. "We didn't mean to push you away. It was hard to understand back then." She didn't shout. She didn't cry. She stepped aside and let them in. But something in her heart had changed. They sat on her fine furniture, admiring the framed portraits and half-finished canvases. Mama touched a sculpture. "You've done well, Adira." Adira poured them tea. "I've done what I was always meant to do." There was silence. Baba finally said, "We were wrong. We didn't believe in you." Adira nodded slowly. "I needed you then. Not now." They looked wounded. "I'm not angry anymore," she added. "But I won't let you treat me like a burden again." Mama sniffed, embarrassed. Adira smiled gently. "You're welcome in my life, but you no longer sit on the throne of it." At her new gallery opening in Abuja, Adira stood beside 3 young women. Uche, a bold abstract painter from Enugu. Zainab, a quiet sculptor with dreams bigger than her hometown. Leo, a mother of two who painted with her children at her feet. They were her protégés, her rising circle. She spoke at the event. Too many brilliant artists are silenced by the voices around them. I was one of them, but I broke free. And now, I'm building a table where no one has to beg for a seat. The crowd erupted in applause. Adira returned to Ajadai, not as a daughter of shame, but as a queen of color. She painted a mural on the market wall, a woman with open arms, rising out of cracked ground, surrounded by blooming sunflowers. Children gathered to watch. Old women nodded with pride. Even Mama Nwoke, the town gossip, clapped and said, "Her spirit lives in her paint." Adira's mother watched from a distance, tears in her eyes. The same girl they once dismissed was now painting healing over the same soil that hurt her. That night, her family invited her to dinner. It was warm, familiar, but different. They praised her, asked about her next shows, talked like fans, not controllers. When Mama asked, "Will you move back home someday?" Adira smiled and said, "Home is where I'm seen, and I see myself clearly now." Baba nodded. "We respect your space, daughter." It wasn't perfect, but it was peace. And Adira had learned something powerful. You can forgive without folding. You can rise without resentment. You can love without losing yourself. Adira was invited to speak at the University of Nsukka, where hundreds of art students gathered to hear her journey. She didn't sugarcoat it. "My own family thought I was wasting my life," she said, standing tall in a flowing Ankara jumpsuit splattered with paint. "They kicked me out the night before I signed my first life-changing deal." Gasps filled the room. "But listen to me," she added. "When the world doesn't clap for you, clap for yourself. When they don't open doors, build your own." Tears rolled down the cheeks of a girl in the front row. She was heard. Back in Lagos, Adira sat with her three ments, Uche, Zainab, and Leo, over jollof rice and plantains. "You're my family now," Adira said, raising her glass. Zainab looked up. "Even though we're not blood?" Adira smiled. "Family isn't always blood. It's who builds with you, sees you, stays when the fire's hot." They laughed, cried, and shared their own stories of being overlooked. From that night, they called themselves the Brush Sisters. The Brush Sisters began hosting free workshops in slums and villages across Nigeria. Children who had never held a paintbrush before began dreaming in color. Adira funded materials, transportation, and snacks. News outlets started covering their work. "Art is not for the elite," Adira said in an interview. "It is for every girl told to keep quiet. For every boy who thinks he has no future." She was no longer just a painter. She was a movement. One quiet morning, Adira received a letter in brown envelope. It was from Baba Okonkwo. "My daughter, I never knew I had a jewel in my house until I chased you away. But I thank God I did, for you have become more than I ever imagined. Forgive an old man's blindness. I see now. Your father." Adira held the letter close. She had waited so long for those words. She didn't need them to feel whole anymore, but they were still a balm to her spirit. Adira opened a massive creative center in Lagos and named it Freedom Studios. It had exhibition rooms, recording booths for spoken word artists, classrooms for kids, therapy spaces for healing through art. On the opening day, people poured in from across the country. Her mother arrived in a colorful head wrap, her eyes filled with both pride and apology. "Adira," she whispered, "you are bigger than our small minds ever saw." Adira hugged her gently. "Now you see. That's all I needed." A sleek black SUV pulled up outside Freedom Studios. Inside was Mr. Balagan, a millionaire art investor who once ignored Adira's portfolio. "I was wrong about you," he said smoothly. "Now I want to invest 500 million Nigerian nairas to take Freedom Studios international." His smile was polished, but Adira felt the weight of his pride. She leaned back. "I'm not desperate anymore. What I've built wasn't made for men who only respect fame." She turned him down. Her team was shocked. But she knew. Freedom means saying no to what once controlled you. One of Adira's former classmates, Kalechi, grew jealous of her rise. He began spreading rumors online, claiming she stole her artwork from others. Her success is staged, he tweeted. Ask those under her. Blogs picked it up. Her integrity was questioned. But Adira didn't fight back with noise. She held an open studio session, inviting journalists, critics, and the public to watch her paint live, from blank canvas to finished masterpiece. For 6 hours, she worked in silence. The world watched her gift unfold. The lies collapsed. At a local exhibition, Leo presented her first major collection, Mother, Mirror, Maker, portraits of African women balancing family and passion. A renowned gallery owner offered her a solo show in London. Leo burst into tears. I never thought a woman with babies on her back could make it this far, she sobbed. Adira hugged her. You're not just making art. You're making history. Another brush sister rose. One morning, Adira didn't get out of bed. The pressure, the expectations, the constant demand to inspire others. It crushed her silently. She stared at the ceiling, numb. Zainab knocked. You okay, Auntie A? No, Adira whispered. Instead of pretending, she opened up to her circle. They sat with her, cooked for her, prayed with her. Zainab painted a mural on her studio wall, a woman lying down, with sunflowers blooming from her tears. Healing began. Even strong women need rest. Sitting under a mango tree after their latest village workshop, the Brush sisters made a promise. We'll never forget what it felt like to be unseen, Uche said. We'll keep the door open for others, Zainab added. We'll speak the names of those who came before us, Leo whispered. Adira looked around and said, and we'll protect each other when the world tries to silence us. They placed their paint-stained hands together in the dirt and carved their initials into a stone. It was their altar of sisterhood, a promise inked in soul. Adira received an invitation to speak at her old secondary school in Enugu, the very place where her art teacher once told her to focus on realistic goals. She walked the dusty corridors, now repainted, but still echoing old voices. During her speech, she pulled out one of her childhood sketches, torn at the edges, faded, but still alive. This was the drawing I hid in my math book, she said. I was told it was a waste of time, but it built my future. The students stood to applaud. The same teacher wept quietly in the corner. Adira's mother came to visit the studio alone. She sat quietly in the gallery, staring at a painting titled, Daughter of the Fire. Mama, that's me, Adira said. Her mother's eyes filled with tears. I didn't know how to love what I didn't understand. I feared for you, but I wounded you. Adira sat beside her, resting her head on her mother's shoulder. Healing came slow, but it was real. They cried. They prayed. They started again. Just when peace was settling, Adira's father fell ill. He had no money. His new business had failed. Relatives stopped answering his calls. News reached Adira through a cousin. She visited him in the rural hospital. He looked thin, weak, humble. I deserve nothing, he rasped. But your face is the only one I wanted to see. Adira paid for his treatment, but set a boundary. I'll help, she said, but I won't return to the place where I wasn't loved. It was compassion with clarity, forgiveness without blindness. Freedom Studios hosted its first international exhibition, titled Unseen, Unbroken. Artists from Kenya, Ghana, South Africa, and Nigeria showcased works that told stories of being overlooked, underestimated, and reborn. The exhibition drew thousands. Adira stood beneath a towering portrait of herself surrounded by hands, some pulling her down, others lifting her. She whispered. Every bruise became a brushstroke. It trended across the continent. Hashtag Unseen Unbroken became a movement. Zainab had always been the wild one, funny, bold, and loud. But Adira noticed her becoming quieter, staying late at the studio, sketching alone. One night, Adira found her crying over a torn notebook. I'm pregnant, Zainab said. He left. And I feel like my art won't matter now. Adira hugged her tight. You are still a creator, in every sense. Together, they painted a mural of a woman giving birth to both a child and a dream. It became one of Freedom Studios' most talked about pieces. Zainab smiled again. Uche had always been the quietest brush sister, focused, gentle, unnoticed. But one afternoon, she stormed into the studio shaking. A man had tried to buy her latest piece, Widow in Red Clay, and offered her exposure instead of payment. He said I should be grateful to be seen. Adira's eyes flared. We don't beg for seats at tables. We build our own. They launched a campaign called #PayAfricanArtists, calling out exploitation and pushing for equity in the industry. Uche became the face of the movement. She found her voice, and it roared. Heavy rains hit the region and Freedom Studios flooded overnight. Water soaked canvases, ruined frames, and destroyed months of work. The team stood ankle-deep in water, speechless. Adira didn't cry. We'll paint again, she said. Mud becomes clay. Clay becomes strength. The community showed up the next day. Students, fans, and even strangers came with buckets, towels, and snacks. They rebuilt in 7 days. The next exhibit? Washed, but not washed away. Adira's aunt and cousins arrived from Abuja. Now that she was famous, they wanted to reconnect. They smiled wide, posed for photos, and asked for a little support to start a fashion line. Adira looked at them quietly. My door is open, she said, but it's not a bank. If you want relationship, stay. If you want resources, earn them. Some left offended. Others stayed. She didn't lose sleep. At an art gala in Lagos, Adira met Obinna, a soft-spoken architect who had once illustrated children's books. He admired her work from afar for years. They spent nights walking through markets, sketching together in silence, sharing roasted corn and childhood memories. But Adira hesitated. I don't want to lose myself again to love. Obinna replied, then let's love in a way that lets you remain whole. Their relationship began, not with fireworks, but with peace. Inspired by their growth, the Brush sisters launched the Adira Art Scholarship for young women in rural Nigeria. Hundreds applied. On selection day, a shy 16-year-old girl named Amarachi walked into the studio with charcoal drawings on brown paper bags. I couldn't afford real paper, she whispered. They gave her the scholarship on the spot. Adira smiled at her. You remind me of who I used to be, hungry and holy. Amarachi cried. You remind me of who I want to become. Adira and the Brush sisters were invited to Nigeria's biggest cultural event, the Festival of Fire, held in Calabar. Each artist was asked to represent their identity through performance art. Adira stood barefoot in a white wrapper, her body painted in bold red and black symbols representing rejection, resurrection, and royalty. As drums beat in the background, she painted live on a spinning canvas, images of her past, her scars, her rising. When the spinning stopped, the canvas revealed a phoenix in vibrant Nigerian patterns. The crowd erupted in cheers. The elders bowed their heads in respect. With fame came judgment. A viral blog titled, Adira is Overrated sparked a wave of critics who called her art emotional noise and her movement dramatic. Some gallery owners withdrew invites. Others hesitated to book her. The Brush sisters panicked, but Adira stayed calm. She said, let them speak. My canvas is not for cowards. Instead of shrinking, she doubled down, hosting an exhibit titled Louder, featuring raw, bold, unapologetic African womanhood. The exhibit sold out in 48 hours. Weeks later, Adira received a handwritten letter. It was from her father, now in remission and living alone in their ancestral home. He wrote, I was wrong. I saw a daughter and tried to raise a servant. But you are a storm with steady hands. If you ever forgive me fully, come eat with me one day. Adira folded the letter and placed it inside her journal. She wasn't ready, but the door stayed open. Amarachi, the scholarship girl with drawings on paper bags, unveiled her first exhibition, Hunger Has a Color. Her pieces showed empty plates, barefoot journeys, and joyful eyes in the midst of poverty. Art critics wept. One collector offered her 2 million naira for her collection. She turned to Adira and whispered, You didn't just teach me art. You taught me to believe I deserved light. Adira hugged her tightly. Now go share it. During a radio interview, the host asked, You've made millions. You've built a movement. Who are you now, Adira? She paused. I'm no longer the girl begging her family to see her worth. I am Olanma now, one born to bring beauty. She smiled. And my brush will never go silent again. The new Freedom Studios expansion was nearly complete, an eco-friendly building made with local materials, designed by Obina. It had classrooms, outdoor sketch gardens, and dorms for young artists. The opening ceremony brought guests from across Africa. Adira gave a speech. May every brushstroke in these walls remind you, you are not a mistake. You are a masterpiece becoming. Tears filled the crowd. Children chanted her name. The elders gave her a title, Ada MMA, Daughter of Grace. Adira's mother reached out with a simple message. Your uncle has passed. We need you home. She hadn't stepped foot in their family house in years. When she arrived, silence fell. Everyone was watching, waiting to see if the Adira from the newspapers would look down on them. But she served jollof rice. She helped wash dishes. She sat beside her mother and offered no blame, just peace. That night, her cousin said, You're different, soft but strong. Adira replied, No, I'm finally myself. A young man named Chuka showed up to Freedom Studios. Dirty, barefoot, carrying nothing but a rolled canvas. He'd been living on the streets after his family disowned him for pursuing art. His painting? A portrait of his late grandmother feeding him umla. So vivid, it moved Adira to silence. She said, You're not too late. You're just on time. She gave him food, a room, and access to mentors. Within a year, his art hung in galleries in Accra and London. Obina asked Adira to marry him under the stars after a Brush Sisters retreat. He gave her a ring made from melted bronze, symbolizing strength through fire. But Adira hesitated. I love you, she said. But I love this mission, too. Obina nodded. I'm not asking you to shrink. I'm asking you to expand with me. They didn't rush a wedding. Instead, they continued building together but free. No pressure. No deadlines. Just purpose, wrapped in partnership. 1 year after Louder, Adira held her most personal exhibition yet, The Fire Within. Each painting told her story, from the night her family threw out to the moment she stepped into her new name. At the center of the gallery stood a self-portrait titled Reclaimed. It showed Adira, wrapped in gold and earth tones, her eyes fierce, her smile wide, her brush lifted like a sword. The inscription read, I was never broken, just buried, and now I bloom. The crowd didn't clap. They stood in silence until one woman whispered, She painted us all. The international investor who first signed Adira called her again. But this time, not for a contract. He said, I've been watching your movement. I want to build a foundation with you to fund artists across Africa. They called it the Olanma Fund. Within 3 months, 50 artists across Nigeria, Ghana, Kenya, and South Africa received grants, supplies, and scholarships. Adira didn't just become a legend. She became a door. A filmmaker came to Freedom Studios. He wanted to make a documentary on the Brush Sisters, showcasing how women from villages and cities rose through paint and purpose. Adira was hesitant. She didn't want fame to water down their truth. But Amarachi said, We must document what the world tried to erase. The documentary premiered in Lagos and later at Cannes. Tears fell in every room it entered. And Adira whispered to the screen, Thank you for never giving up on me. One day, Adira received a voice note from her mother. Olanma, I watched your documentary. You were the child I failed to see. But now I see, and I weep. Adira listened in silence. Then she sat by her canvas. She painted her mother, not as the woman who hurt her, but as the woman who never knew how to love loudly. When she gifted the painting, her mother broke down. I don't deserve this, she said. Adira replied, neither did I. But we forgive anyway. A brutal storm hit the region. Lightning struck a tree, which crashed into one of the Freedom Studio wings. No one was hurt, but the space was badly damaged. Adira gathered her team. We built this from nothing once. We'll do it again, with more beauty, more color, more soul. The community showed up with tools, donations, and art. Within 2 weeks, the wing was restored, brighter than ever. Someone painted on the rebuilt wall. What fire didn't burn, the rain couldn't drown. On her 40th birthday, Adira wrote a letter to the girl who once cried herself to sleep. Dear little Adira, they didn't see you, but you saw yourself. They didn't believe in you, but you refused to shrink. You gave your pain a brush, and it became light for many. Thank you for surviving long enough to bloom. She read it aloud at a gala honoring her work. The room rose to its feet, and in her heart, Adira felt a full circle had closed. Adira hosted an open house at Freedom Studios. To her surprise, her entire home village came. Elders, aunties, cousins, even those who once mocked her. They brought gifts, carved stools, handmade wrappers, palm wine, and kola nuts. The village chief stood and said, we banished a seed, not knowing it would become a tree for many. Adira welcomed them with warmth, not bitterness. She told them, sometimes, the stone the builders reject becomes the foundation. Adira was invited to curate an exhibit at the Louvre in Paris. She brought not just her own work, but art from 12 African artists she mentored. Their theme, home is the color you carry. International critics praised the exhibition. But the greatest moment came when an African girl stood before Adira's piece and whispered, I want to be like her. Adira smiled and replied, you already are. After years of deep friendship and partnership, Adira and Obinna held a garden wedding behind Freedom Studios. She wore a golden gelly with white lace, her skin glowing with joy, her eyes soft but fierce. Brush sisters sang. Children danced. The guests signed the guest book with paint, not pens. As they exchanged vows, Obinna said, I don't complete you, Adira. I simply join the art already in progress. And she answered, I choose you, not to hold me back, but to walk beside my wings. Adira sat in her quiet studio late at night. The walls were full. Her life was full. But her heart said, paint one more. So she took out a blank canvas and began. She painted herself, standing in a field of sunflowers, barefoot, looking at the horizon. In the sky above her head, words floated. She didn't wait to be chosen. She chose herself. It was her final piece before retirement from public painting. She hung it in the Freedom Studios library. Years later, a young girl visited Freedom Studios with her mother. She stopped at Adira's final painting and asked, Mummy, who is that? The mother replied, That's Olema, the woman who taught us that art is not what you hang on a wall, but what you give from your soul. Freedom Studios became a movement, not just a place. The Brush sisters trained thousands. The Olema Fund became continental. And Adira? She spent her later years teaching in silence, loving loudly, and watching others bloom. She was never forgotten, because her life was the masterpiece. This is the end of our story. Please like and subscribe for more upcoming videos. Thank you for watching.